Right, guys, welcome, welcome, welcome. It's Friday, the 31st of July, 8:04 a.m. So lots to obviously go through for the London session there this morning. But obviously, first things first, I wanted to go through how our week's gone, and it hasn't gone great. Yesterday was a bit of a scramble. So yeah, it was. Yeah, mainly a late flurry on gold, which helped to recover. But yeah, this week's been tough. All right, we've had a speech, which I think Alex has just asked me a question on that. On that, let me go over this question. First of all, took off yesterday. Dan, could you please explain how you would interpret the Warsh speech? I was a bit confused. I interpret the speech hawkish, but I don't understand why dollar dumped and 10-year yields rose. Right, so. Um, the speech, all right. So Kevin Walsh didn't give any indication of obviously raising interest rates. All right, that's what's going to keep renewed strength into the dollar because naturally, if the dollar's interest rates are higher, it attracts bigger in investment in because that's the goal of it. It stops obviously the population borrowing as much, so curbs their spending. But obviously, then it's going to encourage, investment into the dollar because the interest rate is high. Now, three of the FOMC members actually voted to hike the interest rates. So there's a real like clash at the moment within the Federal Reserve Committee. All right, so they basically markets have seen this as it's yeah, not obviously not so strong for the dollar. Yes, we've obviously had escalation, but I'll go over that too. So the escalation, is it's happening. There was rumors that one of the US aircrafts was damaged yesterday. But obviously, well, whether it's true or whether it's not, but the reason that oil is not flying, right, is because there is diplomatic talks obviously happening at the same time. So if we look at oil on a daily, is kind of holding where it is, and that to me, if we've got some obviously renewed escalation in the markets, then it's not going to increase any, because there's talks happening at the same time. So that's kind of a little bit of a macro outlook in regards to why the dollar is crushing. Now, what also happened, which was very, very interesting yesterday, we did have an intervention, right? This was Japan and apparently and Korea, right? This move here, that's why it was bigger than any other. If you look at the daily here on euro, 100 pips, pretty healthy day. Pound was, 140. All right. Yen was massive. So yen was, yeah, nearly 600. So, that was they were aggressively buying yen and aggressively, selling dollars yesterday. And I think that's what a little bit of yields were. Now, that's why we had this jump here. If you look at yields from yesterday, yes, it's a green candle, but it gapped to the downside. So it's actually had two, negative d days here. So um, you know, pretty interesting in regards to, if you understand, Japan, well, most of that side of Asia are big investments in US 10-year yields. If anyone wants a bit of research to kind of look into it, China, Japan own a very large proportion of US, government bonds, and there are kind of rumors that they could crash the US market if they want to. They own that many, and obviously Trump's aware of it, and so obviously he's been buying government bonds, or the US have been trying to counteract this because yes, although the US effectively control, yen in a way, because everything, they've obviously got a large supply of oil. Oil is priced in dollars, and so it's a little bit of control there. And obviously their counteraction is they take that control back by buying government bonds, and obviously it then offsets. It doesn't matter if yen drops because the government bonds go up, they're obviously worth more, and obviously the country stays in harmony. So you know but this, yes, was one initial intervention yesterday, and it would, hopefully everyone's going to be staying clear of yen completely because it's pretty, messy. So I'm not even going to be touching it. I don't even think it's worth it. I'm expecting, well, I don't really know what I expect. I mean, we're still high. We're obviously back at 160. They obviously want it below here. This is their kind of equilibrium, line where things, start to become on, kind of amber alert here, and obviously it gets redder and redder. So they don't want price up here. So it's quite interesting in regards to, what could potentially happen. Um, Now I've got it wrong a few times this week, which will always happen. But obviously I don't like it. I'm not happy with it. But you know what? That's trading, and that's why I'd stepped away yesterday afternoon because I'm not here to put my my kind of capital in danger. So. Um, we're obviously looking at this, low here. All right. We've got yesterday's daily low. The daily high is not going to be tapped at all. There is no chance. Asia, pretty small. All right. If we look at US, I did mention in the video yesterday, expect obviously this 101 this 100 level to hold. Now, one thing that I find quite interesting, within 2 days, we have dropped from 100, 500 all the way down to just below 100, and so it's a huge drop. Ye Yields haven't had this drop yet. So don't think that. I don't think the dollar can drop much, lower. But then what I have to do is uncloud my brain and go with trend, so I'm not, not gonna try and buy the dollar as much as I'm, kind of there's a small part of my brain screaming at me saying, you know what, it's dropped all of this way. What are the chances of it dropping, more? I had that expectation yesterday, and obviously this happened here. Now let's have a little look at what we've got coming up today. So We've got inflation data for euro. Should This will be quite interesting because it's July, so I'm expecting this to come out slightly hotter. So increased. I'm expecting, and this is going to kind of dictate to us what the rest of, what other currencies are going to be experiencing. So. And then we've got nothing else really. We've got some employment costs, which aren't going to do a lot. We've got some inflation data for Chicago, but pretty much, lots of noise here. But if you're dissecting it, is there's only two pieces of news here today which we need to worry about. And so, it'll be euro, and it'll be euro, and it's going to be this here, which yeah, it is slightly later on. I'd like to not be worrying about trading on a Friday. So for that reason, I'm probably going to avoid euro. But we can have a little look at it. So in regards to gold, all right. Now we've had Kevin Warsh, we've had the Bank of England, speak about how they're obviously worried about inflation. All right, so if inflation is higher, and this is inflation driven by the price of oil, all right, that's going to send yields up higher. All right, and that's going to send gold potentially back down here. If we look at gold here, it's not really moved too much. It feels like it has, but it's not. It's kind of ranging here. We're kind of really trapped. Let me just refresh this, and then that alert will go. We'll just get back onto this. There we go. Right. If we're looking at kind of gold on a 4 hour, we're kind of trapped here. So kind of trapped in this range here. All right, so it is 100% have this marked up because either way, we could potentially drop. I think there's probably more chance at the moment of gold just pipping to the outside. We're going to have full blown escalation, and I think Iran's going to have to hit a tanker or something for obviously this to happen, and then obviously oil to kind of push to the upside here. So just really, really keep an eye on oil um, today, and and then in turn, yields. But yields obviously had this huge move here. And I don't know if there's enough of a calling to push it up that high. Now, I'm going to be completely honest here. It is a gamble um, today in regards to obviously what is happening. So, going with trend, we're going to sell. All right, sell the dollar. Um, but there's two ways that you can play it, and obviously we'll have a look at pound here. You either set up your chart here, and you sell from here. All right, that will be your intraday kind of trend. Something like, so if we did say 25 pips and then 50, so something like this, that would be option, number two. All right, but obviously we also have to, remember we're going against trend. It's a counter trend trade. But if you look at something like the RSI, everything is very, very overbought here. So there'd be reasons why. I'm sorry, someone's calling me. There'd be reasons why you would, take it. Um, in turn, we got to wait. We've got to be a bit patient and potentially go for something from here. Um, let's just have a look at this. So if we did 7.5, uh, we did 9.5. Oh, 9. Let's just write down. So 7.5. So we would need to do something like this, hoping for a drop, not obviously going too crazy. And then I'm just going to move this one here. And then you could allocate this kind of a move here, So we're really into two kind of minds here. And I think we could probably comfortably have a 1 to 3 here. So those would be your two options here. Not saying one's right, not saying the other one's right, but obviously I'm going to go. With trend. We're going to go back to basics. Remember, you know, trade like a human, act like a robot. So we are going to look into something like this where we're going to allocate for dollar to strengthen slightly, which in turn should push dollar up to here. Is there enough for it to push past that? No. So I'm expecting it to come straight back down. That would be my kind of expectation here, would be that obviously we pop up and then obviously pop back down again here because nothing can change. But obviously it needs to release slightly, to then push back down. But obviously we've also got to remember it's Friday. There's been some big moves here, and there's going to be guys who potentially might want to take some profit off the table coming into the weekend. We're also at the end of the month, so potential end of month, flows. So that's kind of what I would be looking at on GBP here. But obviously, again, just make sure that you are reducing risk because it's one of those days where it's kind of high impact. So that'll be our TP2. That's our stop. And then we've got entry number one here. Sorry, entry three. I always do that. We've got entry two. And then we've got entry number one, right? Those would be my entries allocating for a move to the downside here. All right. Then for TP1, I'm going to be because we only just missed out on TP1 on Euro yesterday. I'm going to be quite reserved on it, actually. I'm going to go for probably around here. Oops. So that would be my euro. All right. Allocating for it to come all the way down here into this area. And then we'll push up from here. All right. So that would be euro USD here. So if right, euro USD. uh, Dear. Yeah. Right. Sorry, not Euro USD, GBP. I don't know what's wrong with me. GBP. Right. So then we've got Aussie. All right. Aussie is horrid. It's really horrible. I mean, I bet if you looked at this on a RSI, it would look horrible. Not too bad. Hmm. I mean, the chances of it coming where we want it are slim. So maybe we do have a look at euro, but allocate a slightly less than what we would expect. So something like this. Let's just have a look at the daily. Let's have a look at Asia. Yeah, we'd be way below here. So we'd be having the expectation that London will be trading something like this range here. All right. And then we'd be allocating for New York to potentially trade half of London. So Obviously, because of Euro, CPI, everyone's expecting it to come out hotter. Um, and I'd rather err on the side of caution this morning. So let's do a 50 pip and 250, something like this. I'm pretty happy with. So we're going to change our tune and stick to Euro. Right, let's just move this a bit higher. Okay, so we're going to just move these around a bit. We've got TP1. I'm going to have that quite tight as well. 260, 49, 50. There we go. Right, so let me just change the colorings on these. Entry one, entry two, entry three, and stops. Right, that is what I'm allocating here on Euro. All right, I just can't see AUD USD coming out and tapping us. I just want to allocate enough that we're kind of covered here. So we've got a lot of support here. I'm not by all means having the expectation that this is gonna hit within an hour. It might be one that leads on to the this afternoon. The only trades for this morning are obviously slightly higher risk because we've got to go against trend, and sell into this area. So we've kind of looked at it previously, yesterday, and yeah, I'm sticking with the plan today. Interesting enough, stocks have been recovering. If we look at them, yes, yesterday had a really nice recover, looking like they might potentially recover from Wednesday by the end of today. So there is some risk appetite. Um, Gold is a tough one, and I'm only going to trade it on lower time frame today. But if I was to look at this from a higher time frame, we'd obviously have to mark up Asia because that should be standard protocol. Um, am I doing? I've marked it wrong. So sorry, Asia's here. Um, what about the daily? I mean, previous day you'd have to mark up too. So you've got a few areas here. 2 hours. Just have a look at this. Yeah, I would be actually utilizing these areas and trading within all three of them. Um, because we've got obviously Asia high, Asia low, and then obviously the daily low. Sorry, yeah, previous daily low. We also got a previous daily high here as well. So that's what we've got there. That's you know it gives you a pretty good idea of obviously what to be trading and why. But I'd probably just because of trend, you want to be erring on the side to buy this today, especially obviously with yields dropping the way that they are. We've then got obviously oil, down 1.3%, 1.6 percent so far today, but then at the same time, can I see it breaking below 80? No, so that's the real tricky bit about today, and I'd rather allocate and step back a bit, and obviously potentially rather than just letting Asia play out, we let Asia and New York sorry, Asia and London play out too. Right, let's have a look at some of these questions here. Greg, why did dollar tank when US market opened? I explained that yesterday. It's just as sorry, I don't know why I'm getting everything muddled up. I explained that earlier about it's everyone's expectation. It's the three of the members wanted an interest rate hike, so and obviously that's not happened. He didn't speak about hiking. He does keep his cards quite close to his chest. Remember, it's only his second speech, so I mean, Jerome Powell's in for a long time, so you kind of understood his, speeches and his tonality, and everyone understood his personality. So he was a little bit predictable because you just had to edge on the, side of caution. And if he said anything positive, the market just went poo, and so yeah. But no, let's wait and see. Alex, what is this forward guidance that he talks about? He doesn't want to do it anymore. No, so Jerome Powell used to kind of, say, well, if this happens, we will do this. If this happens, we will do this. You know, Kevin Warsh, he's kind of refusing to to say anything. Alex again. I read something like Fed loses credibility by speaking hawkish, but not raising rates. Would you agree? I don't think he was hawkish. I don't think you can speak hawkishly when you're in times like this. And I think that the fact that half of his team, his committee, or not half, but a big percentage voted against him. I wouldn't say he's not. I wouldn't say he was speaking hawkish. I would just say he just which is interesting. I kind of agree with it. He's refusing to kind of he's refusing to to give them anything, so he doesn't want anyone to act on something that he's not really going to you know carry out. Alex, do you think there could be an AI bubble regarding stocks? That's what I spoke about on, I think it was Monday. It's kind of already happening here. Nvidia, yeah, yes, it's made some ground, but it's been plummeting. Got SK up 17.5%. I spoke about this Monday. No, yeah, Monday. Wow. So yeah, it's a tricky one. AI market is primed for China. They were a little bit behind. They've caught up now, and obviously that's what's plummeting the cost a bit. So yeah, I do think it's been coming for a while. If you look at how high it was back in May, and obviously it's just been one big downfall here. And this is obviously Nvidia here. So yeah, right. Does anyone have any more questions, or are we're all happy? We all understand, So just obviously make sure today you're watching oil, you're watching yields, and then we've got our probably only two positions that they this morning, but I am, and hate me all you want. I'm going to err on the side of caution this morning. So yeah. But right, if that is all the questions, then I'm going to end it here. Have a great Friday, and yeah, that's make sure we stay nice and disciplined. Have a good one, team. Have a good one.